Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday. Welcome to the 7th session. I cannot believe we're 7 sessions in already of this wonderful series called Bringing Our Children Home, brought to you by Reconciliation Canada. My name's Candy Palmater. I will be your moderator for this and all the sessions as they roll out. Today, we are focusing on building a movement, and we are going to do a 1-hour session again, the same as we did on Tuesday night. That seemed to go over really well. I've also really enjoyed when some of you joined, you put in the comments where you're joining us from. Please feel free to do that as the session rolls on. It's kind of fun to know where people are coming from. I noticed that one of our panelists, Karen, said to me, "Oh, I thought you were an uptown girl," and I got to do a little Billy Joel quote by saying, "Downtown has come uptown just for you." We are going to start, as we start every session, with an opening song and an opening prayer, and then we'll get into our discussion. We have a repeat performer for our opening song today. He was with us, I believe, on session 2 with his beautiful jungle background, which I love. Willie Lewis is going to do the opening song for us. Take it away, Willie.
Awesome. Once again, thank you for having me back. It's an honor and a pleasure. This morning, I was just going to go ahead and do a greeting of the day. This song is an ancestral song from one of our lady ancestors. She lived in Stanley Park before the time of the settlers. And when they did arrive, instead of, causing a stir, she decided to paddle over to where we know down Mission there, Oslahan, and so this song came to her, and so this was a song I share. Greeting of the day.
Tahoe, thank you, Willie. Could you hold your drum up for the camera? I could see some beautiful artwork. Oh, isn't that gorgeous? Beautiful. What a beautiful drum.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that wonderful opening
My
and for
pleasure.
joining us again. And hello to everybody who's been joining. I can see everybody's telling us where they're from in the comments. I'm coming to you from the unceded territory of the Mississauga, the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people here in the Greater Toronto area. But I am Mi'kmaq, part of the Wabanaki Confederacy from the East Coast. Eel River Bar is my home community, and I am so happy to be here with you today. We are going to start now with an opening prayer from our resident leader, Chief Bobby Joe, who we always like to give him just a second to get his camera up and his mic going, which I have to say, my brothers and sisters are way younger than Chief Bobby Joe, and it takes them way longer to figure out how to link in. So good morning, fearless leader. Hello and welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this gathering. I'm so happy that you've taken some time out of your weekend to spend a few minutes together with us. As you know, we've been going through some really difficult moments, not only Indigenous people, but more so, but all Canadians. And we're wrestling with the issue of unthinkable acts that have been done in the past, specifically the discovery of unmarked graves of little loved ones a while back. And it's brought a deep heaviness over all of our lands. And I think in this moment, people are reflecting and thinking, how could that be? But more importantly, many people are saying, I want to do something. And so in Reconciliation Canada, we knew that and heard that, and we thought we'd initiate these gatherings and talk about as many possible issues around residential schools and colonialism that would help everyone consider how they can engage in reconciliation and making this place better for all people, that it becomes inclusive and respecting, mutual. It shares the land that we welcomed everyone to, that we were willing to share with everyone else. And so we're charting a new future together. That's the ideal dream, to chart a new future where all people are equal, where justice is dispensed equally, where hatred and racism are mitigated. There are so many good objectives about this gathering, and it says something about all of you, that in your hearts and your minds, you're thinking deeply about how we can be better together. So while our hearts are heavy and we shed tears for those little ones, and while our relationships are tense at times, and while there's a lot of confusion, we're still going to turn to the Creator today. Not still, we're going to turn to the Creator today and ask for his guidance in this gathering. Have him open all of our hearts and minds that we see and listen and hear and understand to the very best of our abilities, and that we leave here, we're better for it, and we're going to be willing to engage where we might have feared to tread before. So being together today has significance, real importance. And I want to applaud all of you for being here. I'm going to say a prayer in Kwakwala. I know when I grew up in St. Michael's Indian Residential School, we prayed every day. It seemed all day long. And it was all in a language that I didn't understand at first. And slowly, I never heard any prayer in my own language, Kwakwala. So when I have the opportunity to pray, I love to pray in my language. And Creator understands all languages. So it matters not what language you may speak, and if you wish to pray, your prayers are heard. And while some of you won't be, or most of you won't be understanding the words that I'm using in prayer, the thoughts, they're grounded in love and care and compassion, and the idea that we need to move forward together in our common humanity, that nothing separates us. We belong to each other, and we ought to make a progress on our path forward the same. Kila kesla usually kikama karin feno eat kwekam gali slur chok that nala. Wikila zola chano kasukesla. Misten takalus has almost a kila kada nakwa kahla kada ko elasi. Ka tletso, ka wtletso, ka omeso sulkula baktaha. So sida equal them kano hitchula. Ka ola mekles igena kulaks no bibikwina. He mchawis no sasmin kaste. E o makakabala e ka kila kales. La hosilu balts anais. Ka masa sin ukulala watamlach before equal all my relations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief Bobby Joe. I always love hearing the language. It reminds me of Sister Dorothy Moore, a very prominent educator in the Mi'kmaq community, who was a survivor of residential school. And Sister has a beautiful singing voice. And not only would they not let her speak in her language, they would not let her sing when she was in residential school. And I had the fortune of being in the audience once when she was being given an award as a fearless female activist. And when she went up to receive her award, she said, instead of a thank you speech, I'd like to sing to say thank you, because I was never allowed to sing in residential school. And she proceeded to sing Ave Maria, but she sang it in Mi'kmaq. Whew, there was not a dry eye in that house. It was such a moving moment. It was beautiful to have been there for that moment. So again, I thank you for that. We're going to take a moment now to turn our minds to the children who, all the children, those who survived, those who didn't survive, those who we still have to bring home. So if you can take a moment now, we'll just take a moment of silence for those children. All right, thank you so much for that. I just want to remind everyone watching, excuse me, we're going to talk about things that we can do as we move forward. But if you want to do something right now today, if you're looking for somewhere to give a monetary donation to, Reconciliation Canada does take donations. We are going to list in the chat a link where you can go if you would like to donate to some of this great work that's being done. And right now, this is the only really organized response that I'm aware of across the country to what's happening, to try to provide a spot for people to come together and work through our feelings on what is happening right now. So again, it doesn't have to be a large donation. Whatever you can spare is always helpful. And yet I always say, if every single person who cared donated $1, oh my goodness, what a difference we could make in this world. So today in our discussion, if you joined us Tuesday night, you know that we had Chief Bobby Joe as well as Karen Joseph, and they have a unique perspective because not only have they worked in reconciliation for so long, but we have a survivor and a woman who was raised by two survivors, right? Their father and daughter. So you get a real personal feel for this, as well as all of the sort of corporate history, if we can call it that, of where reconciliation has come from. And on Tuesday night, we really talked about the past, where it was born, how it formed, and what we are going to talk about today is what's happening right now and what are we doing as we look to the future when it comes to reconciliation. So I am going to ask Karen now to turn on her video and her microphone as well. Just in case you don't know, Karen is the co-founder of Reconciliation Canada, and you can go to the bios on Reconciliation Canada to see the biographies of all of our panelists that we've had over these 8 sessions. Karen, do we have you yet? There she is. Hello.
Good
So
morning.
I am going to ask one of those, I think they call it, or they refer to it as navel gazing, a navel gazing question. The first question I'm going to ask you both is this. Imagine you are waking up tomorrow morning and everything has gone the way you want it to go. Tell me what the headline in the newspaper says and what that article talks about has happened. And I'll let whichever one of you would like to start.
I'll start from a blue sky perspective.
Yes.
I wake up and I've been so tired. I've been working a long time on reconciliation as a layman, wanting to do so many things, knowing that I've heard my brothers and sisters, our leaders in our own communities, talking about what they need. But I wake up and I don't remember all of the conversation preceding me. Suddenly the world has changed. That's the first big thing. The world has changed. And I look around and I see little children whose faces are lit up. They happen to be little Indigenous children, brown children, and they're smiling and they're laughing and playing. But even more importantly, they're working with these other little kids of all different colors, white, green, whatever color it is. And for the first time in all of my life, I see our children together. They knowing more about love, knowing more about how to live love than most of us. And there they are on the playground, hugging, being one, Namayu. So that's the first thing I noticed. I walk down the road and I come into the village, and it could be my village or it could be the village back east. And I see prosperity. People aren't hungry, and they have clean water, drinking water, and they have adequate housing. And I think, oh my gosh, this must be a result of them having been able to join in the economy and share the wealth of this country. And then I watch TV in the evening and I watch the news, and there are my leaders in the House of Parliament speaking for us, but not only that, speaking for general, broader, deeper Canadians as well. And I think, oh my gosh, we're really beginning to join this thing called common humanity. And people are respectful, they say hello, they bow to you in passing, and others of different color and creed and gender and sexual preference are all together, having, there doesn't seem to be any wall or bias or ism, hatred, racism, xenophobia, whatever it is. And the world really has changed. But what's more important than anything, I think, is that I recognize that it's because these people opened up and were able to hold dialogue, deep meaning, transform their impressions about each other. No wrongful assumptions. People somehow shifted. They want to hold each other up and celebrate each other and not be separated or suppressed or put down. Everybody has a place in this new vision. And I say to myself, thank God. I want to understand how that happened. Because once we achieve any degrees of reconciliation, we have to be sure that we are able to maintain and keep that new level, this elevated level of reconciliation. So we always have to be questioning ourselves, how did we get here? What worked so that we can continue to do those things that work? And what was it about all of it that was so fundamentally important? Just boil down into one word, love. Suddenly people learned how to love without abandon. So I'll leave it at that for that blue sky.
I would like to buy a first class one-way express ticket to that future, please. Put me on that train. That's the one I want to ride. Karen, what are your thoughts?
Well, that's a tough one to follow, isn't it?
There is. There is.
I know he's been giving deep thought to that for a long time. What does that mean? What would he see? I think, I think about his story and the story of so many of the children who went to those schools. And I think about him at the top of those stairs. And I just thought, imagine if he came out of a school, all of our children come out of school on the top of those stairs, wherever they are, and they're feeling empowered. They're feeling like they can take on the world, like their own special gift is their own superpower, and they're prepared to do that. So I think that would be one thing for me. And I think the other thing that went through my mind was to be able to walk down the street or in an alley or anywhere and not feel afraid all by myself, that I would feel like I was safe. That would be huge for me. And I think that, well, he was talking about all of the people. I was thinking, wouldn't that be cool if everybody was like able to speak their own language, and you could see aspects of their cultures shining through and what they're wearing and how they present themselves. And, we could all learn more about one another. And I was also thinking that it would go around the world. We'd hear about our grandmothers and our aunties, and the women would be those ones chattering. I remember when I was a young girl and all the women used to get together to work. They just blah, 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 all day long and laugh and laugh and laugh. And, just, it was so much fun to be there. I had no idea what they were talking about because they always spoke in Kwakwa, but it was just a blast to be in that space with them because they were so comfortable and they were so happy, and they were doing, they were taking care of us the way they wanted to. So those are some of the things that come to my mind. And the men there used to be a big log right beside us. We're just off the beach. And they were carving it out into a canoe while the women were right there, and they would be checking the fish around the fire, make sure it's barbecued just right. And it was a lot of fun. So that kind of stuff as well, right? Each of us being able to prepare our foods in the way that we want to, so that we're well nourished. And yeah.
I love that you said how the students are on the top of the steps, but then you also brought in that cultural piece, because I feel one of the issues right now is that it feels to me almost like we have to have one or the other, like we have to trade it off. So I'm younger than my siblings by 20 years. And my siblings were born when my family was quite poor. My father was still struggling with alcoholism. Then daddy got sober. They had me. So I have all this paper on my wall, right? I've got my law degree and I've got all these accolades, and you can turn on the TV and see me, but I cannot speak a word of my own language, nor can I hunt or fish to support myself, nor can I bead anything or sew anything. But those are all things that my older siblings have. So I do feel like somehow they force us to trade it off if we want that paper on our wall. So I just love that your vision included that we could be both, that we could actually have both. Because I think, you know, my one of my elders who's passed on now, Grand Captain Alec Denny, always said, if you cannot speak your language, there will always be a part of yourself that you do not know. And I think that is absolutely so true. So a wonderful big sky way to start it. Now I want to take us back into the reality of the here and now. And I want to talk about, what does this movement look like? So if I think back to some of the movements of the past, you know, everybody remembers AIM, and kind of the 70s was that time when civil rights were really bubbling up and people were starting to get active. And then you flash forward to Idle No More, which was kind of almost exclusively an online movement. It spread so quickly because people had this platform to spread it online. So my question to you is the current movement on reconciliation, and as we move forward, what does it look like? And is it a virtual movement? Is it a live and in-person movement? Is it a movement that is going to happen as a collective? Is it things that people have to do individually? Just kind of talk generally about your thoughts around that, like how you see that working.
I'll jump in again. The whole idea of reconciliation in Canada, of course, is predicated by the vast division between Indigenous people and all other Canadians, and has been accentuated by the Truth and Reconciliation Report, of course, and its 94 calls to action. Reconciliation, the process in Canada, needs to be a dual track right now. We have so much internal reconciliation to do in the Indigenous community, so much. When you colonize, is that the word? Yeah. When you colonize, you lose everything about you, or you lose much of it, because it was a very deliberate attempt, and that's the all of those matters that are referred to as genocide or genocidal. So on the inside, from the Indigenous perspective, we have to reconcile our families, we have to reconcile our ways of being, our culture, everything, our worldview. We have to restore it to some level of what it once was. And who knows, maybe it can be totally restored. And so that's going to take a lot of work in itself. And the exciting thing about reconciliation in Canada is that while we know that we have to reconcile internally, the bigger process of reconciliation is one involving all of our neighbors, of every color, of every creed, of every race, of every difference. They're all here now, and we call them newcomers, we call them settlers. And they, at some point where we intersect, we need to advance with this idea of reconciliation, that we now live under one giant roof, so to speak. And if we're going to do that, of course, then there needs to be some fundamental shift or change around our relationships. And it means that everybody has to tear down the walls of bias and wrongful thinking that I mentioned about, and all those other ways that we've thought before need to be challenged and changed, transformed. And so that's when we bring in the settlers. One of the things I've always held as a very strong view is that reconciliation in Canada cannot cannot happen with Indigenous people only. All Canada and all Indigenous people need to be joined in this effort to reconcile between each other. We could reconcile politically, we could reconcile, and those other people who are in government could acknowledge our treaties, even try to honor them. They could create new ones. They could give us small chunks of the economy or the wealth in the country. But if they're only done by politicians, that can be done, and then they dust their hands off, and we're still seeing each other differently. Those people, we people, them people, and the same biases exist, the same hate exists, and the prejudice exists. We need to come together to have real dialogue, all of us. And I think that's what's missing in this country, that we don't go that deep, that everyone thinks it's only government and the churches and survivors to some degree sometimes that need to be involved. And all of us will be charitable in some way and maybe donate a little bit of money or get involved in specific projects that have a beginning and an end. And then dust your hand off again. And we have to move away from this dust your hand off again, because reconciliation is a process that needs to be nurtured and valued, encouraged, developed, cradled, loved in every way, every day, so that people, when they wake up in the morning, think about reconciliation as a core value. It's not the first time I've spoken about that, of course. All of us need to be serious about reconciliation, and central to all of it is that we become engaged in it because it's a deep core value held in our souls, held in your soul. And that it's the only thing that will ever mitigate all of the turmoil and destruction around us, around the globe. If somehow we all wake up in the morning from whatever country, whatever, however far, and we say, today I'm going to wake up and I'm going to live in reconciliation. And so every thought, when you start beginning to think about reconciliation, is a thought that says you do no further harm. And even further to that, when we think about the environment and Mother Earth, we need to reconcile with Mother Earth as well. We see the famines and the floods, earthquakes and fires. It's time we woke up and we begin to think about how we're going to reconcile with the firmament, Mother Earth, the globe, whatever it is. And so reconciliation, when we think about it, is at so many levels, involves so many parties. And the secret to all of you on the screen that want to do reconciliation, do those things that are doable, first of all. The things that you can engage in and participate in and encourage. And if you have to start small, but become engaged in reconciliation. And it'll exponentially grow. And then it becomes a way of being for more and more and more people. And it's the only way that our politicians will ever get it, that when all of us are living in reconciliation, that we're going to hold them accountable for responding in the same way to the things that are broken around us. So that in general is a perspective that I hold.
It's so interesting when you talked about the idea of holding government accountable, and the idea that we can't do this in a silo, that it has to happen, everybody has to take part in it. And there's something about the Indigenous way of being in the world. I worked for 10 years in government, and I always refer to that time as the most difficult time in my life. And I felt very much beat about when I was there. I felt like I guess what I'm trying to get at is that as Indigenous people, we tend to care for one another very carefully. We tend to be really careful of one another's feelings, and it was making me think while you were talking, Chief Bobby Joe. There's a wonderful woman that you, the attendees, don't see. Her name is Charlene Seward. She organizes these talks and does all the heavy lifting behind the scenes to make this happen. And she and I had a little kind of a miscommunication over the last week. And what was hilarious about it when I was reflecting on it is I've had miscommunications all over the place when I worked in government, and it's usually because somebody was coming at me like a bulldozer. Charlene and I were both trying to be over reverent with one another. Like I was trying to be careful to be really respectful of her, and she was trying to be like super respectful of me. It was hilarious because we were both like not understanding where we were getting, but it was from this place of unbelievable carefulness and kindness. And I was thinking, wow, if I could have had those misunderstandings in government, I would have got a hell of a lot further than I was able to get. And so many of my friends and relations who work in government structures have those same really horrible experiences. And it always feels to me like when I get hired to work within community, it feels like a little bit of a vacation because I know I'm not going to have to fight for space. I know I'm not going to have to be protective of myself. It's such a lovely way to work. And I wish the rest of the country could clue into that and see that it's a much better way to live. It's a lovely, kind, and loving way to go through life. And it would work so well for everyone if everyone could get in that frame of mind. So when you were talking, you had me thinking so much about that. And I did want to use it as an opportunity to acknowledge all the work that Charlene does for this too, so that everyone out there who's watching can know that you see our pretty faces on the screen, but there are some folks behind the scenes who are bringing all this to you. So with that, Karen, I turn it over to you. I saw you were taking some notes as Dad was talking there. So
yes, this is well, I guess to answer your question, yes, both and, right? I really believe that reconciliation isn't something that you do. It's a value that you live, and it's a daily progression, because when you take one step, you realize there's more places and more, and then before you know it, you've got laughing lines instead of frown lines, right? And you really understand what love means and the power of love to overcome hatred and bigotry and racism and all of the other isms. And which isn't to say that we all agree on the same things, that we still have the opportunity to have our very own opinions on things. But like you said, being able to share them in a way that does not feel like it's undermining anybody else's opinion. And we find ways that are mutually beneficial for one another. So those are the things that I think of in terms of outcome. But when I think about, so reconciliation is that personal journey. And I think the other piece of it is we oftentimes in this world think about power. I don't really have the power to do that or the power to do this. I have virtually no power, but I have a lot of influence. Yeah. And I'm able to invite the people that I've made these really important relationships with over the past 8 years and call them in these times of need. And they show up and we're able to get things done. I'm not particularly talented in any one thing except for building those relationships and being able to connect those networks and working really hard to make sure that it benefits everybody, that one person isn't always giving and the other isn't always receiving, and so on. It's that to me is like the beauty of Namuyut. And then I think I have so much opportunity to interact with people who do have power, who are key decision makers, who can create policy, who can find budgets, who can change narratives, and so that's how I contribute to reconciliation. I really make sure that I know the people around me, that I know where they're from, especially, and why they come to the table in the way that they do. But I also think that the online piece of it is really, really important. When you're thinking about culture and language, a lot of our kids are really like amazing in their capacity to learn the language online, to sing the songs online. We've even had dance practices online with one teacher who will show us and then watch, and and it's quite fun, and you just kill yourself laughing because sometimes they just disappear off the screen, and it's like, hey, come back here. So it's there's a way that we've been able to do this, even in COVID, to find ways to connect with one another, to put a camera up and have dinner together, and things like that. So I think that it's both. I do believe that it's predicated on dialogue. It's predicated on knowing yourself and beginning to know other people without judgment, from a place of love, just really trying to understand. I could have walked out of my experience just like my father, and being bitter and cruel and self-destructive for the rest of my life. And I just had, I guess it's like the courage to trust again, to trust that people cared, because I honestly didn't think that non-Indigenous people really cared enough. And I'm finding in this movement that they care very much, just not knowing what to do. And the best way to find out how much they care is to hold your hand out and say, you want to come and join me in dialogue? Let's have a circle. Let's create some safe space and just talk about the things that are important to us. And like the questions you're asking today, what kind of Canada would we want? And what's our responsibility? Because we're not children anymore, but we do have these beautiful young children, all of us in our lives, whether you're an auntie or a brother or sister, and we have an opportunity to do something better for them. So why not? Right? So that's part of it. And I also, I think about what would need to happen. I think about that policy, the political and legal system that reflects that value of Namwayu, and especially when we're thinking about upholding the laws, right? Because right now the laws really protect and maintain colonialism. They protect and maintain those in power. The structure, the thing that has the most power under the law is the corporation, not even the human, the corporation. All across this country has more rights than any individual in the world. And that to me is just insane. So how do we change our laws and our policies to reflect that our community, our social structures are what are most important, that we take care of one another, like you talked about earlier. And then the other piece is health. What if health focused on well-being, on building resilience, on nurturing our gifts, recognizing our strengths? What if that was what health was about, building our bodies and helping us to get proper food into us, and instead of creating all of the damage, letting us do all of these things, and nobody knows how to do this, so they're taught their kids, and then okay, you're half dead, and they're like, okay, let's treat this, millions and millions of dollars treating what could have been saved in the very beginning, right? So how would we shift that? And then the one thing that I think would be really cool is what my father talked about, this economic reconciliation, where we're able to shift the narrative around wealth to one that reflects wealth as our capacity to take care of others, rather than our ability to accumulate just for ourselves, right? And so that, because what that does to us right now is the people that accumulate, they only accumulate because of the people. The people are giving, and so the land is giving, and then this may sound terrible for our funders, and then they accumulate all of this wealth and then call it charity, giving it back. Yeah, some little portion of it, right? And so I think that, really flipping that narrative and thinking about the limits to growth and our responsibility to Mother Earth, and So I got lots of thoughts on this. I kind of, this is the place that I like to play. So
That's your bread and butter.
yeah, it is. Yeah.
As you were talking, I'm seeing people saying how they're so appreciative of the sharing. And I see we have a school teacher with us, an elementary school teacher. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge that, because there is it is first of all, it is courage, Karen, to trust and to trust when you have been hurt previously. And I thought of that a lot when my parents sent me off to school. I was the redemption baby in my family, and they were the whole family, brothers and sisters, everybody's so careful with me. And they had to trust and hand me over to school teachers who could have in a moment damaged me beyond all recognition. But I was very fortunate in that I had a couple of key teachers at different points in my life that chose to see me for who I was, not for what side of the tracks I was born on, not for who my father was, not for what my last name was. And a couple of those educators have had such a profound impact on my life that I maintain deep personal relationships with them to this day, 35, 40 years since they have taught me. And so, if you are one of those people who are joining us who are not Indigenous, who are thinking, what can I do? I speak to hundreds of thousands of people through the year. And I say to those educators all the time, you're with me. You're with me every time I go out and do that, because you help to add to my journey instead of taking away from it. You help to build me up instead of pulling me down. So everybody has got a role to play in this. Now, when I do these kind of talks, I've done a lot of them in the last couple of weeks where people have been talking about how do we measure success? And that's an important question, because I've always felt that is what has failed in government when they talk about diversity and inclusion in terms of hiring. They never measure, okay, once we hire Indigenous people, how long do they stay? How positive an experience is it, right? They just say, okay, we hired so many, and they leave it at that. So I don't want us to make that mistake when it comes to reconciliation. So the question I want to put to the two of you, how do we measure success as we go forward? How do we know if the reconciliation movement is achieving something? What would you see as those markers that we would use to try to measure success? And I know that's not an easy question, but I'm going to put it out there anyway.
Karen, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think this is probably one he wants me to answer. We each know what one another loves, say. So specifically when you're talking about hiring people, it's not only the retention, and this is true for any culture. Remember that the government bureaucracy has a culture, medicine has a culture, law has a culture, there's histories in those professions, and there's certain expectations that come with that. Well, every culture has a culture. And so I think you start seeing change, or you start seeing, knowing that reconciliation is happening when change happens. You can't expect to have all of these people come in from all of these different cultures, and it's not reconciliation if your culture doesn't adapt with that. Like, you want to hire Indigenous people struggle with maintaining jobs or maintaining their participation in academics, not because they don't have the wherewithal to be successful. Many of us are quite brilliant. And like you talked about earlier, we have other responsibilities. We need to be there for our cultural practices. We need to be there for our families. We need to be there, if we want our traditional foods when the food's ready. And so you got to go home and be a part of that if we want to make that. That's been the fundamental issue in maintaining Indigenous employment for generations. And yet they keep trying to hire and expecting people to stay. Well, it shouldn't be one or the other. There are creative ways to make hiring policies that reflect those needs and still recognize the value of participation in that, right? So I think for me, those are the places where you're going to see change in terms of reconciliation. That's just one thing off of the top of my head. And the other piece that that I think about is especially in relationship to women, not just Indigenous women, but women in particular, because under this sort of colonial principle and these colonial practices, you know, there's very much a patriarchy, and there's very much an old boys club, and there, you know, it's one another helps one another, even though they're not many times not as nearly as skilled in the areas that they're working in than another person might be. And I think of some of the prophecies that I've heard about women in leadership and women being in relationship, sort of their strength. Not all women, some of us are very different than that, but in general, women being those in relationship, and men being kind of the doers. You know, when you're having a conversation with a fellow, typically they'll be like, okay, what are we going to do? Okay, how can I fix this? And the woman's like, please, would you just listen to me for a minute? I don't want you to do anything. The only reason why I know this is because I'm the one where my sister's always saying, please just listen to me. But that the role of women is in times of chaos. The leadership of women is needed in times of chaos. That's why you're seeing so many women emerge as leaders right now, all across the country, because women are the ones that have the relationships that are necessary to understand what people need in this time of chaos. And it's a circular time. So chaos is a circular time. Nobody really knows what the decision is or where we're going or how we're going to get there. But the women come in and, okay, talk to you. And then once the decision is made, men take it forward, get it done, right? This is what needs to be done. You take it forward. And then when we hit chaos again, the women come. Okay, now what do we need? Okay, now we go this way. And so I think really recognizing those unique gifts of men and women in different leadership positions, and not saying only those that go forward indefinitely to the same place all of the time is what we need. So I think that's a place right now that I fundamentally believe we're at. I believe that reconciliation is going to happen around this world through the networking of Indigenous women globally. We're the one peoples that share the same values and cultures all across the globe. And so I think that's where it's going to come from. So I really believe that we need to uplift those women that carry those teachings and those values and that knowledge.
I love that you brought that up, because the news, you know, particularly mainstream news, they don't do a really good job of like true reporting. And if you think about in our generation, the Oka crisis is the thing that almost broke our country in two. And for months and months and months, leaders on both sides, 99.9% men, tried to come to peace on that and couldn't do it. And it was when a group of Indigenous women came in and said, all right, we're going to work this out. And that's when it got settled. But you never see that reported in the news, nor do you hear it being taught in schools. But that's where the peace finally came from. So I love that you highlighted and brought that up. I see that we have some questions, but we are coming to the end of this segment. But I am going to keep those questions, and I will pose those in future sessions as we move forward, because I think some of them are great questions as we move along this series. So I want to thank you both once again for sharing so openly. I think this is such an opportunity for Canadians, all Canadians, to really lean in and listen and get some really good, solid ideas and thoughts, things to think about as you go forward. And, you know, I think one of the major things you can do, particularly if you're here right now listening, you know, when you're having supper tonight and the kids are at the table, talk about what you heard today. Get their thoughts on what they think about it, because that's where the next generation is getting educated, is at the supper table. So if you are not having these conversations, people say all the time, oh, the next generation's going to fix it. Well, how are they going to fix it if they're being raised by this generation and nobody's ever having these different conversations? So I would really encourage you, things that you hear on these talks, take them to your dinner table, take them to your party, and have these discussions with other Canadians. I think that's going to move us forward very, very quickly. I want to again thank everybody who came to watch today. I want to remind you, if you have some extra money in your pocket and you want to donate, there is a link provided in the chat for Reconciliation Canada. You can also donate your time by coming to these sessions and by encouraging your friends and family to also come to these sessions. They are happening every Saturday and every Tuesday evening for an 8-week period. If you missed some of the previous ones, they're available to be seen on Reconciliation Canada. So I am going to ask now to have our closing song happen. And remind you all that we will be back here on Tuesday night. I'll come back at the end just to say a final goodbye, but I'm going to invite Willie with that beautiful drum. That is one of the nicest drums I've ever seen. It reminds me of Wab Canoe's drum, who I tried to have him give me, but I just couldn't convince him. But without further ado, Willie, please give us a closing song.
Thank you. Just gonna sing the journey song, hoping that your journey through the week will be smooth sailing, smooth paddling, just a good time. So the journey song, Yacht Yof. Oh yo, oh yo, yeah, oh yo, oh yo, yeah, hey, 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 yeah, yeah, hey, 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 yeah, yeah, oh yo, kaho, oh yo, aya, ayo, hey, 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 yeah, yeah, hey, hey. Hey, yeah, yeah, oh yo, kaho, oh yo, ayatawa, hey, 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 yeah, yeah, hey, 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 yeah, yeah, oh yo, kaho, oh yo, kapayas, hey, 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 yeah, yeah. Hey, 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 yeah, yeah, oh yo, kaho, oh yo, chia, hey, 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 yeah, yeah, hey, 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 yeah, yeah, oh yo, yeah, oh yo, yeah, hey, hey. Hey, yeah, yeah, hey, 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 yeah, yeah, oh, yo. Oh, see ya. Have an excellent week.
Thank you so much, Willie. Your voice reminds me of one of the singers from the Eastern Eagle Singers. Eastern Eagle is a wonderful drum group on the East Coast, and they're the host drum for the Candy Show. And having not been home to the East Coast for almost a year and a half now because of COVID, I miss those men so much. When I hear your voice, it reminds me of the sound of Eastern Eagle. So you're making me feel good, warm feelings of home this morning as well. So
Ken Cudman told me, makes my heart feel glad.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And once again, in the chat, there is a link if you want to donate. And there will be a slide when I sign off here that'll show you how to get to Reconciliation Canada in case you want to watch any of the previous sessions that we've done. And with that, I thank you so much for joining today. Please take care of yourselves, take care of one another, and stay safe until we see you again on Tuesday evening. My name is Candy Palmater. You can find me at The Candy Show on all the social media. And again, thank you, and I will see you on Tuesday. Bye-bye.